Hello everybody, a warm welcome to Wisdom from North. My name is Jannica and today I am so thrilled to have been able to manifest this very interview with one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Teal Swan. Teal was born with extrasensory abilities such as clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience. She's a medical intuitive and she communicates with thought forms. Now, when Teal was young, she had to endure some traumatic experiences, being in a cult for 13 years. But she managed to escape when she was 19, and today she is internationally recognized as a spiritual leader and a spiritual catalyst that utilizes her abilities to help people and to teach them find bliss in the midst of even the most dark circumstances. Teal, much welcome to Wisdom from North. It's an honor having you here.
It's an honor being with you.
I discovered you like 6 months ago online. And I gotta say, it was kind of like love at first sight because your teaching just resonated with my whole body. And I was so happy when I found it. And I realized you spoke a lot about the law of attraction. And I thought to myself that I'm going to attract this into my life to have you on my show. And now I managed that. And that's so wonderful. And it was mainly like coincidences or synchronicities that made it happen. But there are several things I would like to speak to today. But I thought we could start with if we can try to understand in a way how it's like to be you. Because you've been born with these abilities. And I'm so curious about how you perceive reality.
That's always a difficult thing for me because it's like I don't find people who are able to ask guided enough questions yet to really get into the heart of the difference between the way I see and the way that they see. That's always our biggest issue, especially in philosophy, is how do you know whether two people's realities line up when in reality we could be calling the same color purple, but we're seeing two completely different things, right? So basically, so far, what I've figured out that's different is that I can't perceive negative space. So what that means is, it's like if you're sitting in a room and it's you and me. In between us, most people see clear, what they call air or space. But that doesn't exist in my reality at all. What I'm watching are these vibrating energy fields that are highly multicolored, that are always bleeding into one another. So it's not possible for me to sit in the room and not breathe you in. Makes sense? So I'm breathing you in, you're breathing me in. I'm breathing the wall in. And so people seem to sort of bleed out into the reality that they're living in more so than have like a finite, definite separation or division to what is them. So this applies to external and internal, which is also why I work as a medical intuitive. When people are standing in front of me, and this has been the case since I was born, I'm looking at their skeleton. I'm also looking at organs, at the way that their veins are set up, at their whole nervous system. All of that is something which I don't have to focus to see. It just is what a person looks like. So to see what you look like at the skin level, which is what most people are looking at when they see the average person, I have to like really concentrate.
Really?
And specifically focus on that one layer so that I can see it.
Well, so can you shut that off, or are you seeing through people all the time?
All the time. And that was always the issue. If you want to ask what it was like for me living, it was like a basic hell, because you're taking in so much more information than the average person is, that the best way I could describe it, based on other people's understanding, is that it's like permanently living on ayahuasca in a reality where nobody else lives in that reality. So when you're young, it's like, talk about feeling completely isolated. When you're talking about all these souls that are not incarnated yet, and about these different portals and different dimensions and different realities, the first thing that most people do in this society is to throw you into the institution and say there's something seriously wrong. She's schizophrenic or schizoaffective, or it's always that something's gone horribly amiss, right? So you sort of learn to shut yourself down into this. It was sort of like growing up with like a prison of glass, I used to say, where I could see out and they couldn't see in, because there was a whole lot of things I couldn't talk about without getting in some serious trouble, you know?
So even though, I mean, you're millions of miles away or thousands of miles away, you can perceive my energy through a computer.
Yeah, I'm watching it.
Wow. Okay. So you're. Is there like? Can you watch or see spirits around me then all the time?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, like the better that our cameras get, the better that it gets. So like when I look back at some of the pictures that were taken in the 1950s, you can still see all of that. I can still see the auric field. I can still see into their bone structure and everything. But depending on the quality of the camera, it shows up more or less. And this is doing nicely today.
Okay, I think we might go into that later to ask who's around here. But I think it's important that we start to talk about the law of attraction, because that's something I really want to understand, because I'm a spiritual seeker. That's why I'm doing all these interviews, and I'm finding that I'm the more interviews I do, the more questions I get, and I guess I have a skeptical mind at the same time as I'm very open. So it's a paradox there. But
yeah, wait, but your auric field is a paradox, so I would expect that.
All right.
You have a huge wall of the purple with the outside of that being green. So you're basically a violet with the compensation, which you came up with in this life, is very logical. So it's that sort of rift between those two dramatically different colors that creates that.
I see.
I had to go on a tangent, sorry.
Well, I want to understand the law of attraction, because if it's true, I really want to get it before I die, you know? I really want to start applying it.
Okay.
So, to the people that are new to this, can you explain what is the law of attraction?
The law of attraction is a highly misunderstood universal law. What we mean by a law is the same as the law of gravity. It's basically a binding tendency which exists in the universe. All laws are created within universes to assist in the expansion of our universe. And when we say expansion, what that means is the mind of Source, or the mind of what we would call God, which we are infinitely part of, is continually trying to self-realize. In order to understand more, it needs to gain as many perspectives as it possibly can. So it creates what we call a time-space reality. Our Earth is one of those things. It's a time-space reality. And prior to beings incarnating in that time-space reality, they agree upon tendencies which will help them to learn. So a tendency of Earth is gravity. Upon coming into this life, all of us agree with our thoughts to participate in the collective reality of gravity, right? Knowing that experience, that contrast of not being able to fly, of having that kind of restriction, is going to cause certain desires to emanate within us. It's going to give rise to a specific perspective. So the law of attraction is a much larger law than gravity. It's what we would call the single binding law of our particular universe. So this is beyond our Earth. This includes our entire galaxy. So of the universe which we are living in specifically, the governing law, that's law number 1, is the law of attraction. What it means is, as you came into this time-space reality, you agreed to the fact that your thoughts would be mirrored externally. That's it. So if you want to understand law of attraction, it's that simple. It's the law of mirroring. So the reason that we call this the law of attraction is, in the law of mirroring, there's no such thing as not. You can't step in front of a mirror and say, I'm not here, and have the mirror reflect not you. No matter what, anything you think is going to show up in the mirror. So they say that basically with the law of attraction, this is not an exclusion-based universe, it's an inclusion-based universe. Anything you think of is. So if I'm thinking, no shark, then I'm focusing shark, it will mirror. Make sense? So we can use this to our advantage once we're aware of it. We can say, okay, anything I focus on becomes part of my reality. And so I can attract, mirror, in my reality anything I want to. So if I think, Teal Swan, Teal Swan, Teal Swan, she must show up in my reality. Makes sense?
Yes, that did happen. But, I mean, you can't manifest the things that are not possible, like flying, for instance. I mean, you have
Yes,
to...
you can.
you can.
Yes, you can. This is where we need to get so far outside of our reality. So far, because what we're calling reality is just us agreeing to certain principles and beliefs. If you wanted to sprout wings today, you literally could. But how many of us, honest to God, believe that we can?
Do you believe you can?
No. Otherwise, I would sprout them. But that's because of the way that I was raised. But this is the frustration of my life. I also bought into a collection of beliefs which do not mirror what my other self, that I can align with completely, knows ultimately. And this is the case with the majority of us. The majority of us, at some level, we have this innate knowing about who we are, where we come from, why we're here, also what we're capable of doing. Yet on the other hand, mom and dad has said, those people aren't here. Stop pretending. So we have created a mental rift between what's true and what is not true.
And those belief systems are so strong that it's not possible, perhaps, to break them up.
For most. But this is where it gets really skewed, because we all know that in this universe there are many things which cannot be explained through modern science, right? You have the mother who has a 2-year-old child who gets trapped under a car, and even though she's 100 pounds, she lifts a 1,000-pound object off of her child. This is not new. This is something that we've seen over and over again. And it gets even crazier when you go to the Eastern world, where, when the last time I went to China, I was watching 5-year-old children bend bars of steel that not even your average Hulk Hogan could have even made a dent in. What it is that they have trained their minds to get so far outside of reality, to see this so much as a matrix, that they are capable of bending the time-space reality sub-laws which we experience. People who levitate are able to raise their frequency and their mind, open it to such a degree that the lesser laws below law of attraction no longer apply. So you could think of law of attraction, the law of mirroring, as something which rewrites all laws below it. Make sense?
Okay, so how does this work with the destiny and fate? Because I've interviewed several people and written many books on how we plan our lives before we come down here. We plan who to meet, like soulmates, who we're going to spend our lives with, and our purpose in life. I just don't get it to fit with this law.
Okay, well, it's applying basically because our universe, the basic law of attraction, that applies to us even prior to coming into this life. So let's say you're sitting in source perspective. You don't actually conceptualize yourself as separate, but you can understand, because you can project forth thought, what the progression of your understanding might be. It's like a curiosity vibration. Well, let's see what it might be like if I could experience freedom. But you understand from that perspective that the only way to experience freedom is to understand the exact opposite. This is what we have in our world, is the world of duality. The reason we have duality is because you would choose into a life of lack of freedom so that you could understand what freedom really is. You can only understand white when you are standing in the perspective of black. That's universal law. So you choose into black so to understand white. So what you would do is you would observe frequencies, which is all you're doing. So if you watch let's say you watch a child, or you watch a mother or a woman. Okay, let's say that she's in. Give me the worst, most rundown portion of your country. Where is it?
The worst place?
Yeah. Do you have a part of your country that's notorious for being super impoverished and people are miserable there? No.
Well, I couldn't say that. I would offend the people.
Well, I'm not afraid of it, so let's go here. Let's say that we've got in USA, it's Detroit is probably the lowest vibrational place we have.
Okay.
So let's say that you're watching, in inner city Detroit, you're watching a girl who's 15 and she decides to sleep with this guy because she has super low self-worth, and she works at McDonald's, right? So it's the lowest of the low job. So you watch her and you think, she's so inhibited by her thought patterns that she feels not free. So if I go down as the child of that particular union, I will experience the frequency of no freedom. I'm going to grow up in poverty. I'm going to grow up with a mom who says, what the hell do you think you're doing? Money doesn't grow on trees. So you do whatever you can to get into that perspective, knowing that that will bring forth within you tons of desire for the exact opposite. So you will have the context needed. So essentially what you're doing is you're choosing into the vibration that's the opposite of what you want to experience so that you can comprehend it. That's that perspective thing. And anything you focus on, you then become. So what you do is you assume the vibration that makes you a match to that person, those parents. You also assume the vibration that makes you a match to the specific planets that are coming into alignment at the place and at the time of your birth. It's like everything that you could possibly associate with a person's life, they choose into that upon coming into life. But there's quite a lot that you can see from that perspective in terms of potentials. So let's say I'm looking at those particular parents and that choice. And because I'm in a vibrational reality, I can see that if I make that choice, I'm a match to this and this and this and this. Maybe at 2, my mother dies. Maybe at 4, she's a match to this. Maybe if I come in, she's going to feel even less free, and so she's going to give me up. Like, you can see these potentials, sometimes years and years in advance, even all the way to your death. But what people don't get is that you can always amend things once you're here. Amend meaning we can change it once we're here. Also, once you come down here, there are certain things you opt into prior to living. There are other things you make yourself a match to by being here. So if we understand potentials, we as humans, we like to think of life paths, like I was just describing. At 2, I get left. At 4, my teacher scolds me. At 5, I meet the guy that I'm going to marry, whatever it is. So those potentials, there are sometimes thousands, if not millions,
of potentials?
Branching off of just the one choice that you make to come into those 2 parents.
But how is that possible with all souls having millions of options? How does that go together?
Well, the only reason you would ask that question is because you're trying to apply human understanding to the source perspective. Yeah. It is not a feat at all from source perspective to have multi-billions of potentials for each living being, including insects, a blade of grass, a human. So what you're doing when you come down into this life is you are then, by virtue of your thinking, you are essentially lining up with one perspective or another perspective. One potential versus another potential. So, like, for example, my life. Before coming into this life, it was a definite potential, which I chose into, to experience the experience I did being abused so badly when I was a child. That particular reality was a vibrational match to me in multiple potentials. Now, I could have avoided it by coming down here and thinking differently. By a few little things going differently, I could have been a match to a scenario where my parents decided to take a job that was in another place, not in the place where I ultimately got abused. So it would not have happened. But because of the way that I started thinking, because of my incessant focus on my mother's panic and worry, I made myself a match to that victimhood vibration and thus lined up with the particular potential of that happening in my life. Make sense?
Yes, thank you for such a, thoroughly explanation of this. It was not a simple answer, but I do understand it more. It goes hand in hand, and that's what my intuition has been saying. It's both. It's not either or here. But do you think that you would have been a spiritual teacher without these experiences?
No, I didn't see it in my potentials. If I was to go back, like I've done several times, and sit with the perspective that I was in prior to coming into this life, there was no potential that I saw of doing that if I did not go through that particular experience. But I had multiple potentials for this life. One of my potentials, which would have been the one that I would have gone towards if I did not experience that experience, was to be a chief surgeon for obstetrics.
Interesting. So I guess a lot of people are curious about, are we supposed to be with a mate? Am I supposed to be with that one man or that one woman? Are we destined to be together? Because I just have to ask about that because, well, I see a lot of couples, or some couples, my parents, for instance. It seems like that they're just so meant to be. They met each other so early, and they have this incredible bond. While me, you know, single and free and not, I don't know, I feel like I have another destiny in a way. So are there people who have are supposed to be with one person, for instance, their whole life?
It's definitely a pre-birth intention for many people to meet a specific person and thus have that aid their expansion and progression in terms of perspective. But the major issue when it comes to this is like could be its own like series of 85 books. I'm telling you. The issue with most people is that you can't separate your current relationships from your relationship that you had growing up with your parents. And we can't sort out the relationship we had growing up with our parents unless we start going back and realizing the imprints that were made on us. So okay, law of attraction, let's just be totally honest. Law of attraction is awesome some ways. The worst thing in the world in other ways, because it's going to mirror whatever frequency we contain within us. That means if you were, let's say that you were born and then your sister was born. And when your sister was born, your parents paid more attention to her than they did to you for a little bit, like most parents do when they have babies. But that made you, for some reason, feel super replaced. That experience alone is enough to generate within you what they call an imprint. It's an emotional body imprint, where you exude the vibration of, I am unimportant. Now, because of law of attraction, it's going to be responding to that vibration within you and mirroring in your reality. That means as you grow up, men treat you like you're unimportant. Your friends who are girlfriends don't call you back. You see what I mean? And so we get awfully confused and are like, maybe I'm just completely out of luck. Why am I the only person who seems to like not be surrounded by people who care? We don't realize that it's because we have adopted that particular vibration from that experience when we were that young, that we're still having that reaction mirrored in our relationships and by the universe.
So what can we do with that? I mean, okay, so let's say I'm starting to believe in this. I'm starting to see that it might make sense, you know? How can I change it? I mean, we all have these patterns, and I'm even aware of my patterns, and I see them, but I can't change them. I'm like, oh, here we go again, Jannike. I'm doing the same thing, but it's like it's solid. I can't change it. I have to, you know, climb on Mount Everest. It feels like it's so difficult to change them.
Okay, I'll tell you. What you do is you get completely in touch with your emotions, and the minute you feel something that upsets you, instead of trying to make yourself feel better, we do the exact opposite. We sink back into the feeling completely, and we use our emotions like a rope attaching to our past. So imagine that. So let's go back with that scenario. You've got the sister who's born, you feel replaced, right? Now, in your future life, you're not going to have conscious awareness of that. You don't know that it's because of that. As far as you're concerned, because you're an adult now, that's normal for a kid to feel, right? So when you, like, let's say you have a girlfriend and you keep trying to invite her over, but she has, like, puts no effort towards you at all. I mean, this woman is, like, flaky, and it makes you feel sad and like you're not important to her. The minute that she doesn't show up for that lunch date, you feel those feelings arising within you. Now, at this point, you don't realize that it's the same feeling you felt when you were 3 and your sister was born. But what you do is you close your eyes, you sink completely into the feeling with the intention of feeling it completely in your body. When you do that, after you completely accept that, and it's not comfortable, I'll tell you, it's like really torture. But once you sit in that emotion for a time and your mantra is, I'm completely here with this now, you ask, when was the first time that I felt this feeling? Now, instantaneously, we have to understand intention. Ask and you shall receive. That's not like an option in this life. That's an absolute of this experience. If you ask, when was the first time that I experienced this emotion, you will experience that memory. But people store memory differently. So some people store it emotionally, and some people store it like in terms of olfactory sensation, that means smells. Some people store it in terms of images. And based on how young or old you were, you're more or less likely to get the full memory together. That means that I'm really there. I can smell it and see it and hear it and all of it. So you remain open, kind of like a bubble rising to the surface of the ocean, for that memory to come forward. So that's the point at which, if you completely surrender to it, maybe you can feel that feeling of being really little. So, wow, I can't move my arms as well. I feel uncoordinated. That tells me right there I'm pretty young. Now, what am I seeing in my reality? Oh, I'm sitting in my room and I'm feeling ignored because my mother's with my sister. Same feeling, right? So what you do is then, after you observe this memory, then you switch into taking action on the memory. So first you sit with your little child. This is super step one. Those of you who do any inner child work need to get this. The number one action we have to take with our children, inner children, is to validate their emotion. The reason that these emotions keep mirroring is because you were never allowed to move through them. You suppressed them. So let's say this is what causes you to suppress an emotion. Say you went up to your mom and said, I don't like my baby sister. When can she go back to the hospital? And your mom says, you should be glad you have a baby sister. You have just suppressed that emotion. Now that becomes like this brewing thing, which is now a larger point of attraction, right? You can't move through to a higher vibration. So by validating the child who's feeling that emotion, you give them permission to move through the emotion. So what I'll do is I'll sit on my hands and knees and I'll just hold the child. We're not telling them that they're wrong. We're saying, you know what? You're right. This must feel really bad to feel like all of a sudden you've been replaced. And what you'll notice is just that permission allows your inner child to be like, okay, I'm getting better. So they start to calm down. You'll start to see the emotions subside. That's your indication right there that it's time for you to take action. So what I like to do with my inner child is to grab their hand and walk them right into mom and dad and be like, do you know what's happening right now? Because of the attention you're giving on just the baby, you're ignoring the fact that you're making your other child feel replaced. So your inner child gets to watch you defend it, right? And then you provide the child with whatever need is not met. So if mom and dad can't meet their needs right then and say, oh, we're sorry, we didn't mean to, you provide them with a new parent, or you provide them with a new playmate, or somebody that makes them feel like they're better. So once you watch that improvement, this is what you got to understand is going on. So when we are in our adult perspective, like you and me, we like to tell this lie, which is that the past can't be accessed because it's back then. Now, that may be true in a linear timeline fashion, which is completely limited to the third dimension. The second you step out of that into the bigger reality, bigger picture, all timelines exist simultaneously. Now, this is something that science is now proving. I mean, you don't need some wacky spiritual teacher to tell you. Science is now proving that time is an absolute observational illusion, and that timelines exist at the exact same time in a layered effect. So this is where it gets good. When you are going back in the mind, the other thing that people don't understand is that there is no separate thing between thought and thing, right? Thoughts become things. They are things. A human being is a thought that thinks, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So this is where it gets really good. By going back in your childhood mentally and altering the vibration of that causation, that experience, which caused all that chain of events in the future, you are altering the root of that particular branch that we would call nobody likes me. So by taking care of that, you have simultaneously changed every branch that branched off of that particular experience. That means if your friend blows you off again, you're not going to feel the same way. More than that, means that because right now the vibration you are offering is the vibration of the improvement. So it's that same feeling you felt when your child now has a playmate or now has a new parent or now has whatever. Because that's your current vibration and the law of attraction is responding to it, you can no longer be a match to people who take you for granted.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, it's amazing to hear that it's actually possible to do something with it. But I assume that it might not be that easy to perhaps find that memory, that one memory that was the root. That it might take some practice.
Yeah, it takes practice, but that's okay too, because what you have to understand is that when you ask that question, when was the first time that I felt this, whatever experience comes up is valid.
Okay.
So if what happens, which you'll find sometimes, because here's the thing with children, up until age 8, your cerebral cortex is not formed yet, and so you're experiencing the world mostly through felt perception. So you feel the world before you conceive of the world.
Okay.
Now, most of your memories, therefore, at that age, which is the most important age, is only going to register in you through emotion. So what will happen when you ask that question is that the emotion itself that you're having might intensify. What that means, or it might shift into something even deeper, what that means is that you're having the memory. And we have to understand that the most important part of this particular experience is not that we're altering the memory, like I explained. The most important part isn't that we're like saving the child. The most important part is that we're allowing ourselves to feel something which was priorly suppressed. Because what's causing us the most problem in our life is those suppressed emotions. That's why they're subconscious. I mean, consciously, you know you don't want a friend that takes you for granted. So obviously, if this was all conscious, that wouldn't be an issue. We struggle with what's subconscious. Subconscious means we've disowned something. Subconscious means we have rejected something. Subconscious means we have suppressed something. So just in the experience of allowing yourself to completely experience that feeling, like surrender to it. You're flowing downstream in a river. If it kills you, then it kills you. That type of surrender is what it takes for you to integrate that emotion and no longer be resisting it. See? So you must move through the emotion. This is what we got to get about emotions. If we let ourselves really feel a feeling, we flow through it quite quickly. And I'll tell you this even in my personal practice, because I work mostly with people, and the majority of my clients are terminally ill. So you can imagine what that's like. Today you just found out, bam, you have 2 weeks to live, right? Now try to imagine a grief process for that one. Now what I notice is that the people who suffer the most are the people who try to suppress that emotion, try to feel better about it. We don't want to go there. So what we're calling for, if you understand law of attraction, is a complete reversal of what we would normally do. The self-help industry says, look, you have the power to feel better. I'm going to tell you, guess what? If you're trying to feel better, you're trying to avoid something. So basically, if we let people completely go through the grief process, that means when they get mad, they get really mad. They smash crap. They get super pissed, right? If they get sad, they let themselves sink into a depression. Sit in bed. Stop trying to get better. And guess what happens? They move through it so damn quickly, it would blow your mind. In 2 weeks, I can have these people happy about the fact that they just got a death sentence. Not only happy about the fact that they just got a death sentence, feeling like, you know what? I don't have to die. Woo!
Yeah, because I started hearing that it's something on this planet that we are resisting things all the time instead of allowing.
Yeah. Well, because way back when we got the idea that living a successful life means being happy 24 hours a day. Right. Uh-oh.
Yeah. And all the positive thinking. I mean, in the beginning, I really believed in that. But then I realized that that was not the right thing either. That you need to look at your dark spaces or your shadows. I just interviewed Dr. John DeMartini, and he is talking a lot about that you need to own all your traits. And he doesn't even call it shadows. He says that because he says it's just another trait that has light in it. And dark and light has dark in it too. And yeah.
Exactly. So what I like to explain to people, and it's pretty easy to understand spiritual progression in this way. What we're doing in the very first part of our practice, because like let's say that we opt into an uncomfortable life. How many of us honestly got into spirituality because we felt good? Yeah, none of us. Most of us opt in because we're in hell, and it's like, if I don't find something else that's going on here, I'm going to shoot myself. So basically, what we do is we step out of it into our first type of power. So you could imagine us being down in this deep, dark well. And when we first hear about you can improve your life with your thoughts and positive thinking, we're like, oh my gosh, I can get myself free. So you do. You think positively, your life changes, you get out of the hole. Now, there's still some part of you that's like, you know what, now I'm not all together because I'm still resisting that whole. So you take that light, which you have captured, and you dive with it back down into the subconscious, back down to all these dark spaces, and so the two become one, right?
That's great. I mean, you just explained my path, my way, you know, because I started out there and it helped me. But now it's kind of like, okay, I needed that in order to come here, in order to progress further. It's just magical in a way.
Yeah, so get ready for the next step, because the next step is where it gets really magic, because now you have the capability of creating your reality with your focus. But you're also not creating reality because you're avoiding something.
Right.
So that's the definition of pain. The definition of pain is basically to be propelled in the direction of something because you're trying to get away from something else. That's a painful condition, and that's where most of us are coming from when we enter spirituality. When we're no longer running from something, and that's not what's creating what we want. So I'm not like wanting wealth because I'm scared of poverty. It becomes choice. So do you feel pain when you go into a buffet and you choose pineapple to put on your plate instead of celery? No, it's just a choice. So that's what life becomes about. It becomes this beautiful experience where you're choosing what to experience and you're not avoiding anything. It's like amazing. That's really the inner peace which people watch in these enlightened beings and say, oh, it must be like 24-hour joy. No, it's the willingness to experience anything and the choice because you know you have it.
But what I'm a little bit worried about when I get in a low state or I get a little bit depressed is that, no, now I'm attracting, you know, more of this feeling, and I want to be happy because I want to attract good things. And then I do the opposite in a way. It just gets blurry. So that's the time where I need to be in that feeling and really pay attention to it, right? And work on it.
This is a common fear, a super common fear. I hear that one all the time with people who understand that they create their own reality. The thing is this: if you're trying to not focus on something that your mind is focused on, which it is if you're feeling bad, then you're resisting what you're focused on and you're focused on it more. So we either get to spend, this is the way I like to put it to people, you either get to spend a week trying to avoid something that you are subconsciously thinking about, or you get to spend an hour intensively looking at it and it will manifest. That means that, like, let's say that I'm sitting here in the room and I feel that feeling and I go into it, but I recognize what that emotion is. Then suddenly the TV will turn on and I'll see a horror film, or, like, you know, everything will line up with that. But the thing is that you're aware of it. So what we have to understand is that the experience of the perspective and the vibration of being in an experience and observing the experience is two separate vibrations. So the minute you shift into that observing mode where you are willing to experience, that in and of itself shifts the vibration higher.
Oh.
So what will happen is you'll be aware of the TV showing you a horror film and why that relates to the emotion you're feeling. And you'll be aware of why your friend just called and completely canceled on you because you're aware of the feeling. And so it's not going to manifest as the horror experience in your time-space reality. It's going to manifest as the awareness of all these things occurring. Make sense?
Yes.